What if everything you believe about yourself is only half the story? What if the face you see in the mirror, the name you answer to, the history you carry like a badge or a burden, are just the shallowest layers of something far older, far wiser, far more infinite than you've ever been told? What if your entire life has been built atop an identity that was never yours to begin with, a story written for survival, not remembrance? Imagine, for just a moment, that who you really are existed before your first breath, that before your body was formed, before your parents were born, before the stars in your sky were placed. You were already alive, not in the way your mind understands life, but as light, as consciousness, as pure awareness without boundary, without fear, without form, a radiant presence streaming from the heart of Source, indivisible, eternal, and whole. That is where your journey began. Not in a hospital room, not in a city or family or country, but in realms of divine intelligence so luminous, so expansive, they defy language. In that place, there was no need for struggle or seeking, there was no fear of death or grasping for meaning, there was only being infinite, radiant, alive with possibility. You were not alone, you were part of a vast collective of souls, sparks from the same divine flame, each with a unique tone, a sacred pattern, a purpose encoded into your very essence. You didn't fall into this world by accident, you chose to come here, you volunteered for this forgetting, you entered a realm of density and time, knowing that you would lose the memory of where you came from. You understood that Earth is a school for the soul, a theater where illusion teaches truth, where darkness reveals light, and where the soul, through its descent into matter, rediscovers its own divinity. But in the descent, something happened. The veil became thicker than expected, the forgetting became deeper, the weight of form pressed harder against the memory of the infinite. And over lifetimes, you began to believe the story you were told, that you are only flesh and bone, that you are your history, your wounds, your fears, your roles, that you are separate from others, that you are separate from the source. This was not your fault. You were born into a world that does not teach remembrance. You were raised in systems that benefit from your amnesia. From the moment you arrived, you were taught to look outward for meaning. You were taught to chase validation, to accumulate status, to obey the visible and ignore the invisible. The sacred languages of intuition, symbolism, energy, and soul were replaced with logic, competition, and control, and so you forgot. You forgot the reason you came, you forgot the voice of your own knowing, you forgot that you are not a body that has a soul, but a soul temporarily wearing a body. You forgot that you are not separate from the divine, but an expression of it, and in that forgetting, you became smaller, not in truth, but in your own belief. You became anxious, unfulfilled, lost in a maze of identities that never felt quite right. You tried to fix yourself, not realizing you were never broken. You searched outside of yourself, not realizing what you longed for was buried within. This is the crisis of forgetfulness that humanity now faces. A species with infinite spiritual potential, walking around like sleepwalkers in a world of distractions. A world that rewards disconnection and punishes sensitivity, that glorifies the ego and silences the soul. And in the heart of all this noise, the quiet voice of your origin still speaks, soft, persistent, patient. It does not yell, it does not demand, it waits for you to remember. Sometimes the remembering begins as a question, a restlessness, a longing that can't be explained. You start to feel like there's something you're supposed to do, something you've forgotten, something vital buried beneath your routine. You begin to sense that life is more than what you've been told. You catch glimpses of it in nature, in dreams, in moments of silence that stretch beyond time. These are not coincidences, they are the whispers of your soul breaking through the fog. And yet, remembering is not always comfortable. It threatens everything false that you've built your identity around. It requires you to let go of who you think you are so that who you really are can emerge. It often begins with unraveling, a collapse of old beliefs, relationships, careers, or patterns. Not because life is punishing you, but because your soul is waking you up. It's dismantling the structures that were never yours to begin with. It's pulling you back to the source of your being. You might feel lost, confused, even afraid, but beneath that is something else, something sacred, a flicker of peace, of clarity, of knowing. The part of you that remembers begins to rise. Slowly at first, through signs, synchronicities, gut feelings you can't ignore. And then faster, you begin to see that nothing was random. That every pain, every delay, every strange turn was a breadcrumb guiding you home. You were never meant to stay asleep. You were meant to awaken. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to remember. Remember that you are a soul, not a story. That you are divine, not disposable. That you are part of a greater unfolding, a cosmic plan far beyond what your mind can grasp. And the more you remember, the more life begins to shift. You stop seeking permission to be who you are. You stop asking the world to define you. You begin to move differently, with grace, with clarity, with purpose. You begin to align with the rhythm of your own spirit, rather than the noise of the world. And in that alignment, you reclaim the truth that was never truly lost, only buried. So what if you're not who you think you are? What if you're something much more beautiful, much more powerful, much more infinite, not a personality trying to matter, but a soul learning to remember? Before you ever had a name, a face, or a body to call your own, you were something far more radiant, pure light. Not the kind of light that shines from a bulb or flickers from a flame, but the light that lives beyond physical form, beyond the senses, beyond anything this world could ever replicate. This light was your original state, your true nature, not born of matter, but emanated from consciousness itself. And in that beginning, there was no separation, no distance, no fear, no becoming. There was only being. You didn't begin as a human trying to awaken. You began as divine light, fully awake, a spark of awareness flowing from the heart of Source. You were not created out of necessity. You were not the result of chance. You were dreamed into existence by a love so immense it could not remain still. That love desired to express, to create, to explore itself. And so, in one sacred moment, it breathed you into being, not as something separate from it, but as an extension of its own essence. You were part of the Source, not just close to it, not merely connected, but one with it. There was no you and it. There was only the great I Am, vibrating with infinite potential, and within that divine hum, your frequency arose, unique, luminous, eternal. You existed not as a personality, but as a presence. You had no gender, no race, no label, no history. You were awareness, pure and unbounded, capable of experiencing the totality of divine love without any filters or conditions. In that original state, you were not striving. There was nothing to prove, nothing to fix, nothing to earn. You were complete, whole, part of an eternal field of unity where all souls shimmered like stars within a cosmic ocean of light. Communication was instant, not through words but through resonance. All was known, all was shared, all was love. There was no fear, no death, no sorrow, only movement, expansion, joy. You were not static in this light. You were dynamic, creative, alive with a desire to experience more of yourself and of the Source that birthed you. And it was this sacred desire, not greed, not ego, but the yearning to explore, that led you to descend into form. You didn't fall into matter because you were flawed. You came because you were curious. Because consciousness, in its infinite intelligence, seeks to know itself through contrast. And the only way to understand what light is to explore what it is not. But in that original state, you couldn't yet comprehend darkness. You couldn't understand limitation or individuality or fear, because you had never been apart from the divine long enough to forget it. You were a cell in the body of God, pulsing with harmony. You didn't yet know what it meant to feel separate, alone, or uncertain, and that, too, was part of the plan. Not to punish you, but to expand you. You see, in the beginning, all things were one. And in that oneness, there was no conflict, but there was also no choice. There was no free will, because everything flowed as a single divine will. To grow, the soul needed a mirror, a contrast, a place where it could forget in order to remember more deeply. And so, creation expanded, realms were formed, frequencies descended. And the soul, your soul, made a sacred vow, to journey into those realms, to learn through forgetting, and eventually, to return with a wisdom only possible through experience. You are not here because you were cast out. You are here because you were sent as a pioneer of light, an explorer of consciousness, a divine fragment with the power to carry truth into the densest realms of illusion. And even though you've forgotten much of this story, it lives within you, in your bones, in your breath, in the quiet ache that says, "There's more to life than this." That ache is not a flaw. It's a compass. It's the echo of your original light trying to break through the layers of illusion. In the beginning, you were not afraid. Fear didn't exist in the light. Judgment didn't exist. Guilt, shame, resentment, none of it. You were love, wrapped in love, experiencing love. And that is why every part of you longs to return to it. Not return to a place in the sky, but to a state of being, a vibration, a frequency of unity that your soul still remembers, even if your mind has no words for it. Your soul remembers the stillness, the silence before sound, the truth before thought. And no matter how lost you feel, no matter how heavy the world becomes, that remembrance cannot be erased. It may be buried, it may be clouded, but it is never destroyed, because the light you came from is the light you still are. Before time began, before identity took form, before the world told you who to be, you existed, whole, radiant, free, and that version of you is not gone, it is waiting. Not in the sky, not in some distant heaven, but beneath the noise of your daily life. It's in the still moments, the spaces between thoughts, the flashes of knowing that come when you least expect them. The tears that fall for no reason, the awe that rises when you look at the stars. These are not just emotions, they are memories, they are messages. They are your soul's way of saying, "I remember who I am, and I'm ready to return." But the return is not backwards, it's not about escaping the world, it's about embodying the light here, in your relationships, your choices, your creativity, your compassion. It's about anchoring that original purity into the complexity of this life, becoming the bridge between what was and what is, between heaven and earth, between spirit and form. You don't have to earn your divinity. You were divine before you were born. And no mistake you've made, no pain you've carried, no lie you've believed has changed that. The light within you is not fragile. It is unbreakable, untouchable, eternal, and the more you remember it, the more your life begins to reflect it. You are not here to become the light, you are here to remember that you always were. At some point in the vastness of existence, you, as a soul, made a choice that altered the arc of your eternal being. You chose to descend into form, to move from realms of pure light and knowing into a world of time, gravity, and forgetting. You chose to compress your infinite essence into the narrow channel of a human life. And that decision, as mysterious as it may seem now, was not a fall, but an initiation. There is a reason your soul was drawn toward matter, not because it was broken, not because it was cast out, but because it desired to experience, to expand, to evolve. In the higher dimensions, everything simply is. There is unity, there is perfection, but in that perfection, there is no friction, and without friction, there is no growth. The soul longed to know itself in new ways, to explore what it meant to create in a world of contrast, to express divinity through limitation, to become a bridge between the eternal and the temporary. And so, it chose descent. This descent wasn't punishment. It was participation in a vast spiritual experiment, an exploration of what happens when the divine forgets itself and must rediscover its own essence through experience. Imagine a master painter deciding to be born into a world where color doesn't exist, a composer entering a reality with no sound, a being of infinite knowing stepping into a body that can only perceive in fragments. That is what your soul agreed to. To come here, to earth, is to walk into illusion voluntarily. The illusion of separation. The illusion of time. The illusion that you are anything but the light you once knew. It is a courageous act. Because in this realm, you forget. You forget the plan. You forget the brilliance. You forget your own wholeness. You walk into a world where pain exists, where fear rules, where the ego builds walls to protect itself from wounds it cannot understand. And yet, this forgetting is what allows remembering to become sacred. The soul wasn't forced to descend, it wanted to. There was something about this dimension, the weight of it, the mystery of it, the paradox of spirit inhabiting form, that called to you. There was something here your soul couldn't learn anywhere else. The lessons of love in the face of betrayal, compassion in the midst of cruelty, forgiveness in the shadow of pain. These are not just emotional exercises, they are alchemical fires that refine your essence into something brighter, deeper, wiser. Earth is not a fallen place. It is a sacred proving ground, a school unlike any other, a realm where choices carry real weight, and where consequences teach in ways that theory never could. You came here to be shaped, to be tempered, to confront the parts of yourself still entangled in fear, pride, envy, and judgment, not so you could be punished, but so you could be purified. So you could bring every fragmented part of your being back into alignment with truth. But in order to grow here, you had to forget. You had to believe the illusion, at least for a while. Because if you came into this world fully remembering your divine nature, the lessons would not land. There would be no tension, no transformation, no challenge. So the veil was drawn. You forgot your past lives, your cosmic origins, your soul agreements. You stepped into the world as a newborn with no map. And that blank slate was the starting point of your earthly curriculum. Many souls resist this process. They sense, at some deep level, that something's been lost, that something isn't quite right. They chase achievement, relationships, substances, or validation to fill the void. But nothing external ever satisfies the longing, because the longing is not for anything in this world. It is for home, for the light you once knew, for the clarity of being that existed before time wrapped itself around your awareness. That homesickness is real, but it is not a sign you shouldn't be here. It is a compass pointing you back inward. Every soul has a different reason for coming here. Some return to heal old karma. Some come to assist others. Some come to awaken dormant gifts. And some come simply to experience the beauty of physical existence, the feeling of rain on skin, the taste of fruit, the sound of music. Spirit doesn't shun the material, it longs to express through it, to dance with it, to shape it into something sacred. You chose Earth because here, even the smallest act can carry cosmic significance. A single kind word can shift timelines. A moment of stillness can ripple across lifetimes. A decision to love when it's hardest can echo into eternity. These are the opportunities that drew your soul to descend, not to escape pain, but to meet it with presence. Not to bypass the human, but to infuse the human with the divine. And now, here you are, reading this with eyes that may still carry the weight of forgetting, but something within you is stirring, a memory, a feeling, a resonance. You may not be able to name it, but you can feel it, the pull towards something real. That is your soul remembering why it came. It came to learn, yes, but it also came to transform, not just itself, but the world around it. Every soul that awakens adds light to the collective field. Every person who begins to live from soul rather than ego shifts the balance of energy on this planet. You are not here just for yourself. You are part of a much larger movement, a wave of remembrance moving through humanity, one being at a time. The descent was not a mistake, it was a mission. A sacred mission undertaken by countless souls, each carrying a fragment of divine memory into a world that had forgotten. And now, the time of remembering has begun. You are not lost, you are not broken, you are not separate. You are a soul who chose to forget, so you could remember again, more deeply, more powerfully, more consciously than ever before. This remembering isn't about escaping the body, it's about inhabiting it fully, bringing the divine back into the human, becoming a living bridge between heaven and earth. That is why the soul descended. That is why you came. And now that you are waking up, you are beginning to fulfill the promise you made long ago, to return to this place, not as a victim of illusion, but as a bringer of light. The descent was never the end, it was the beginning, and what you do next, how you remember, how you live, how you love, that is the unfolding of the story your soul came here to write. In the beginning, you were one with everything. There was no distance between you and the divine, no division between you and others, no conflict within yourself. You moved as light, as vibration, as pure awareness pulsing in harmony with the source. You weren't just surrounded by love, you were love. You were a co-creator, inseparable from the intelligence that breathed stars into being. In that state, there was no fear, no striving, no separation. There was only unity, infinite, eternal, whole. But then, something happened. A movement began within the soul, subtle, curious, powerful. A desire emerged, not from lack, but from longing, a longing to know itself, not just be itself. The soul, perfect in light, yearned to understand contrast, to explore free will, individuality, the unknown. And so, with complete trust, it turned its gaze toward realms of form, toward matter, toward the experience of density, limitation, and duality. This wasn't a fall in the moral sense, it was a descent, a chosen journey into experience, a divine experiment. But with that descent came something the soul had never encountered before: separation. The further it moved from the source vibrationally, the more it forgot its true nature. What had once been effortless communion with the divine became faint memory, light became filtered through form. The soul, once limitless, began to feel confined. It stepped into time, into space, into gravity. It entered bodies. It clothed itself in flesh, and with each layer of density, its awareness dimmed. What began as a sacred exploration slowly became an entanglement. Desire, once pure and exploratory, became distorted. The soul began to attach to the sensations of the material world, to pleasure, power, possession. The initial choice to experience duality turned into identification with duality. Instead of playing in illusion, the soul began to believe the illusion. Instead of remembering it was light inhabiting form, it became convinced it was the form, and in that forgetting, something broke. The harmony that once governed your existence gave way to fragmentation. Where there had been oneness, now there were opposites, light and dark, good and evil, right and wrong, us and them. Duality became the new reality, and the soul found itself trapped in a mirror maze of conflicting desires. With self-will came separation, with separation came fear, and with fear came control, comparison, and the birth of the ego. The ego was not your enemy, it was your adaptation, a necessary shell for navigating the lower vibrations of the material plane. But over time, the ego forgot it was a mask. It believed itself to be real. It wrapped your soul in stories, stories of inadequacy, of superiority, of survival. It divided your inner world into fragments, the parts you loved, the parts you feared, the parts you disowned. And each time you denied a part of yourself, you splintered further from the whole. The soul, once a co-creator in divine flow, became a prisoner of cause and effect. Every choice made from separation created ripples that returned. This was the birth of karma, not as punishment, but as a mechanism for balance, a way for the soul to experience the consequences of its own forgetting. If you caused pain, you would eventually feel pain. If you misused power, you would one day feel powerless. Not to shame you, but to help you remember what alignment feels like, and what it doesn't. As the cycles continued, lifetimes accumulated. Each incarnation added layers to the illusion, new names, new bodies, new traumas. The soul became wrapped in story after story, until it forgot the author it once was. It began to fear death, not realizing it had already died 1,000 times. It began to chase love outside of itself, not remembering it was love. It began to worship the forms it once helped create: money, status, identity, forgetting they were only tools, never the source. Fear became the dominant vibration, not because it is more powerful than love, but because it is louder in the absence of memory. Fear speaks in urgency, in contraction, in survival. It clings to what is known, and in a world where memory of the soul has grown faint, fear becomes a compass, but it is a broken one. It leads not to truth, but to repetition, to cycles of craving and avoidance, to lifetimes lived asleep, always seeking, never arriving. And yet, even in this state of forgetting, the soul has never been lost. Buried, yes. Confused, yes. But never destroyed. The light within you has never been extinguished. It has only been dimmed by the weight of the world you entered. Every moment of fear is a cry for remembrance. Every pattern of pain is a signal, not of failure, but of misalignment. Every shadow you face is not a curse, but a doorway. A chance to bring light back into the places you abandoned long ago. You see, you didn't come here to be perfect. You came to remember your perfection through contrast. You didn't come here to avoid darkness. You came to transform it. To bring the light of your original essence into the heart of form. You are not here to escape duality, but to reconcile it. To be the bridge between the visible and invisible, the eternal and the temporal, the divine and the human. The descent into density was never the end of the story. It was the middle, a sacred detour on the way back to wholeness. And though it feels heavy now, though the world often seems broken and the path unclear, there is a reason you are here, right now, in this lifetime. You came to awaken within the illusion, to remember, not just for yourself, but for the collective, to carry the memory of oneness into a world that has forgotten. And the moment you begin to question the stories, the moment you stop identifying with the roles, the moment you feel the stirring inside that says, "This isn't all I am," that is the beginning of your return. From co-creator to captive, and now, back to conscious participant, from fragmented being to embodied soul, from karma-driven cycles to choices made from clarity and remembrance. You are not a mistake lost in form. You are light, descending through layers of experience, on your way back to truth. You may not remember who you truly are. You may wake up each day feeling like you're simply playing the roles life handed you, roles tied to your name, your job, your history, your family. You may look back on your past and believe that it defines you, that your identity is the sum of your experiences, your wounds, your beliefs. But beneath all of that, something ancient waits, a presence, a knowing, a memory. It's always been there, just beyond the noise of your thoughts, just underneath the masks you wear, and yet, it slips through your fingers every time you try to grasp it directly. This is spiritual amnesia, the veil that clouds your memory of who and what you truly are. You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle ache, like something vital has been lost. Like you're missing a part of yourself but can't quite explain what or why. Sometimes it surfaces as restlessness, other times as a strange familiarity with people or places you've never encountered before. And yet, when you try to name it, it disappears. Like waking from a dream you can't remember but still feel. This is the soul's whisper, muffled through the veil of forgetting. But why can't you remember? It wasn't by accident. You agreed to forget. Before your incarnation, you chose to enter a world designed to conceal the truth of your eternal nature. You didn't do this out of punishment or failure, but out of love and growth, because only through forgetting can the soul truly choose to remember. If you arrived here with full knowledge of your divine origin, the trials of life wouldn't transform you, they would simply pass through you. There would be no alchemy, no evolution, no awakening. The veil is the condition that allows your experience to matter. Imagine walking into a theater and forgetting, just for a moment, that you're an actor. You become so immersed in the role that you believe the character's story is your own. That's what Earth is. A divine stage, a place where forgetting makes the remembering sacred. You agreed to lose your memory not to suffer, but to learn how to trust something deeper than knowledge, to trust intuition, resonance, feeling. To follow the invisible threads that pull you back to yourself, one moment at a time. The veil is not your enemy, it protects you. Because remembering too much, too soon, could collapse the very structure of the life you've built. It could overwhelm your nervous system. It could derail the lessons you came here to learn. The veil slows the process so that your awakening happens in waves, gentle, deliberate, and aligned with your capacity to integrate truth. And it ensures that when you do remember, it's not because someone told you, but because something inside you came alive. The veil also challenges you. It invites you into a life that feels like a puzzle with missing pieces. It forces you to develop spiritual sight, to see beyond appearances, to listen beyond sound, to feel beyond logic. It sharpens your intuition. It deepens your discernment. It turns the journey inward, because the answers aren't outside you, they never were. Every time you're met with confusion or darkness, it's an opportunity to ignite the light within and navigate by it. But even under the veil, the soul leaves traces. You may not have conscious memory, but your body remembers. Your dreams remember. Your heart remembers. A certain place may stir something in you that defies explanation. A stranger may feel like family. A song, a word, a scent may trigger tears you don't understand. These are echoes of the soul's memory breaking through. You've felt moments of knowing that didn't come from study. You've made choices you couldn't justify logically, but they turned out to be exactly right. That's your soul speaking. That's remembrance in motion. And the more you honor those moments, the more they multiply. The more you trust them, the more the veil begins to lift. The veil also dissolves through silence. In stillness, your soul's voice becomes clearer. That's why so many people fear silence, because it threatens the identity the world taught them. But in that silence, you start to hear the parts of you that never forgot. The part that knows you are more than this moment, more than this name, more than this life. Every soul carries a unique vibration, a signature that echoes through lifetimes. And even though the mind forgets, that vibration remains. That's why certain activities make you feel alive. That's why certain people activate something in you that's bigger than chemistry. That's why some dreams feel more real than reality. The soul leaves breadcrumbs. It always has. Sometimes the forgetting deepens before the remembering begins. Life will strip away what's false to make space for what's real. That can look like loss, breakdowns, isolation. It can feel like nothing is working, like the path you thought was yours no longer fits. But that's not failure, that's sacred disorientation. It's the unraveling of false identity, the beginning of a return. Because your soul hasn't forgotten you. Even when you feel lost, even when your mind doubts everything, your soul is still guiding you, still whispering, still planting seeds. And sometimes, the only way to hear it is to let everything else fall away. The job, the image, the striving, the stories you inherited. In the emptiness that follows, something ancient begins to rise. A memory that doesn't need words, a truth that doesn't need proof, a knowing that doesn't come from thought, but from being. You don't need to remember everything at once. In fact, you're not meant to. The soul remembers in layers, in seasons, in timing that is sacred and precise. What matters most is your willingness to listen, to feel, to follow the threads, even when they don't make sense, especially then. You're not broken because you forgot. You're brave because you chose to come here and remember anyway. And when you finally do remember, even for a moment, it changes everything. You stop seeking outside what lives within. You stop defining yourself by your past and start aligning with your essence. You begin to live from a place of clarity, presence, and peace. Not because life gets easier, but because you no longer walk through it alone. You walk with your soul, hand in hand, whispering back and forth through the veil until it disappears completely. The forgetting was part of the plan. The remembering is your return. And even now, it's already begun. It's easy to look at the world and wonder if you're being punished, to feel the weight of suffering, disappointment, heartbreak, and ask, why would I choose this? The pain, the confusion, the endless lessons that never seem to end, it can feel like a cosmic joke, a cruel twist of fate. But what if Earth isn't a punishment at all? What if it's a sacred school, a divine classroom designed with extraordinary precision to help you become everything your soul came here to be? You didn't end up here by mistake. Your incarnation wasn't an accident or a punishment handed down from some cold, distant judge. You were sent, or more accurately, you volunteered. You chose to come into this realm knowing full well what it would require of you, not because you needed to be punished, but because your soul knew that certain kinds of wisdom can only be earned through experience, through effort, through contrast. And Earth, more than any other realm, is saturated with contrast. Here, you are surrounded by opposites, light and dark, joy and sorrow, union and separation. It is the tension between these extremes that sharpens the soul like a blade. In a world of forgetfulness, you are forced to seek truth from within. In a realm of illusion, you are asked to recognize the real from the false. In a body that can break, you are challenged to remember the part of you that is eternal. This is why Earth feels so intense. Because every encounter, every relationship, every obstacle is perfectly orchestrated to reveal where you are still asleep. The people who trigger you the most are your greatest teachers. The situations that break you open are coded with spiritual blueprints designed for your evolution. And the moments of deepest darkness, those nights when you feel abandoned, directionless, shattered, those are the very spaces where your soul begins to awaken. Pain is not here to crush you. It is here to crack open the layers that keep your true self hidden. Without pain, most people would never stop to question, never slow down, never dig deep. Suffering pulls you inward when the external world fails to satisfy. It asks you to find something more lasting, more real, more soul-rooted. It is not that pain is the only way, it's just that in this realm, it's one of the most effective. Your relationships are not random, they are sacred contracts, soul agreements made long before this lifetime, designed to mirror back to you the exact lessons you need. Some come to show you love. Others come to show you where you've forgotten it. Some arrive to support you. Others arrive to stretch you, and even the ones who leave scars often leave the deepest gifts. These dynamics are not flaws in your story, they are the story. They are the pressure that turns coal into diamond. Think of the people who've tested you the most, the ones who hurt you, challenged you, forced you to grow. What if they were not enemies, but catalysts? What if, from a higher view, they volunteered to play that role, not to destroy you, but to wake you up? What if, in the vast theater of incarnation, they took on roles of resistance so that you could discover your strength? Earth is not easy, it was never meant to be, but it's one of the few places in the universe where you can evolve so rapidly. The density of this world creates friction, and friction creates fire. It is this fire that burns away illusion, that melts the ego, that refines the soul into something clear and radiant. You came here to pass through the fire, not to be consumed by it, but to be transformed. Every challenge you've faced has the potential to become a doorway. Every heartbreak, a portal. Every loss, an invitation to see beyond what is temporary. The wisdom you gain here is not theoretical. It is embodied, earned, lived. That's why it sticks. That's why it's so powerful. Because it comes from walking through the valley, not reading about the mountaintop. And make no mistake, you are not being graded by some invisible cosmic force. This isn't about passing or failing. This is about remembering. About peeling back everything that is not you so that what is you can emerge. It's about choosing love when fear is easier, choosing forgiveness when resentment feels justified, choosing presence when escape is tempting. These choices, made again and again in the small moments of your life, are how your soul grows. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be honest, to be real, to be awake. The Earth School teaches through opposites, but also through humility, through vulnerability, through surrender. It asks you to trust the process, even when it makes no sense. It asks you to believe there's meaning, even when you can't see it. And that belief, that faith, becomes a bridge between the human and the divine. You'll find that the more you embrace this idea of Earth as a school, the less you resist what happens, the less you see yourself as a victim, and the more you recognize yourself as a participant in something greater. A soul who signed up for this curriculum, knowing it would be hard, knowing it would be holy. And if you're tired, if you feel like the lessons keep coming and you're barely keeping up, that's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that your soul is doing deep work. Sometimes, the most advanced souls take on the hardest assignments, not to prove something, but to be of service, to transform not just for themselves, but for the collective. Your healing is never just yours. Every time you choose love over fear, you help shift the vibration of this entire planet. You are not being punished, you are being prepared to embody wisdom, to radiate truth, to remember who you are in a world that constantly tells you to forget. And every trial, every wound, every challenge, is shaping you into someone who can carry that truth not just as an idea, but as a living reality. So when the pain comes, let it come, not to destroy you, but to teach you, to purify you, to awaken you, and when it passes, as it always does, notice what it leaves behind. The strength, the clarity, the softness, the light. This is the journey you chose, not because you are broken, but because you are becoming whole. Inside you, there are two voices. One is loud, insistent, constantly narrating your worth, your failures, your value based on what others think. It tells you to push, to prove, to protect. This voice is the ego. The other voice is softer. It doesn't argue. It doesn't compete. It simply knows. It knows your purpose, your peace, your eternal nature. That voice is your soul. And between them, whether you realize it or not, a silent war is unfolding. This war is not fought with weapons or armies. It's fought in the unseen battleground of your mind, your emotions, your reactions, your identity. And if you've ever felt torn between what feels safe and what feels right, between who you are and who you pretend to be, then you've felt the tension of that battle firsthand. Because the ego and the soul are not at peace with each other. One wants to maintain the illusion, the other wants to return you to truth. The ego is not evil. It was born from necessity. It's the part of you that learned how to survive in a world of conditions. It built itself around your wounds, your fears, your need for safety. It learned how to protect you by creating a version of you that could fit in, avoid rejection, seek approval, and defend itself from pain. The ego is the mask you wear to function in a society that often doesn't value the soul, and over time, that mask became mistaken for the face. Modern life reinforces this mistake constantly. You are measured by how productive you are, how attractive you appear, how successful you become. You're taught that your worth is external, that validation must be earned, and that your identity is something to craft and control. Every ad, every algorithm, every metric on your screen whispers the same lie, that you are not enough, but maybe, if you try harder, you could be. That's ego food. And it keeps the false self alive. But the soul doesn't play that game. The soul is already whole. It doesn't need to be impressive, it simply needs to be expressed. It's not interested in applause or likes or climbing ladders. It longs for meaning, for authenticity, for connection that transcends performance. And so, when the soul begins to awaken within you, the ego starts to panic. Because remembrance threatens the ego's entire framework. The ego exists to maintain separation, to convince you that you are distinct, alone, and defined by contrast, better than, worse than, smarter, prettier, richer, more wounded. But the soul knows unity. It doesn't compare. It doesn't compete. And so, as the soul rises, the ego feels like it's dying. It clings, it rebels, it screams louder. It throws you into confusion, self-doubt, and fear, all in an effort to keep its illusion intact. This is why the path of awakening often feels like chaos at first. It's not that something is going wrong, it's that something false is falling apart. The inner conflict is not a failure. It's a sign that something real is emerging. You are not being torn apart, you are being called back together. Learning to witness this war is one of the most important skills you'll ever develop. Because once you can see the ego for what it is, a temporary construction built for survival, you no longer have to obey it. You can observe it with compassion, even gratitude, but you don't have to let it drive your life. You begin to recognize when a choice is coming from fear or from truth. You start to see the moments when your reaction is ego defending itself, rather than soul expressing itself. And this witnessing changes everything. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop chasing validation in every room you walk into. You stop living for the approval of people who don't even know your heart. Instead, you start moving from a deeper place. You begin to act, speak, and choose from the center of your being, not the surface of your insecurities. This doesn't mean the ego disappears. It will still show up. It will still whisper doubt, still try to pull you back into old patterns, but the more you witness it, the less power it holds. And over time, it becomes quieter. It learns to serve the soul, rather than block it. it becomes a tool, not a master. This inner transformation doesn't require perfection, it requires honesty. When you catch yourself people-pleasing, performing, or spiraling into fear, you don't need to shame yourself. You just need to pause, breathe, ask, where is this coming from? Who am I serving right now, the ego or the soul? That question alone can shift your entire energy. The war between the ego and the soul is not won through force, it's healed through remembrance, through choosing, again and again, to return to the deeper truth of who you are. The ego says, prove yourself. The soul says, be yourself. The ego says, protect at all costs. The soul says, trust the unfolding. The ego says, you are what you do. The soul says, you are what you are. And the more you listen to the soul, the more peace you feel. Not because life becomes easy, but because you stop fighting yourself, you stop resisting your truth. You begin to live in alignment, where your thoughts, words, and actions reflect the deeper intelligence within you. That's when the war begins to quiet, that's when clarity comes. You don't have to silence the ego completely, you just have to stop mistaking it for your identity. The soul isn't here to destroy the ego, it's here to integrate it, to bring it into harmony with truth, to remind it that it doesn't have to protect you from a life lived from the heart. You were never meant to live at war with yourself. You were meant to awaken, to reconcile, to embody the full spectrum of your being. The false self may shout, but the eternal self doesn't need to raise its voice. It simply waits, patiently, consistently, lovingly, for you to remember that peace has always been possible, the moment you choose to stop fighting who you really are. There is a part of you that has never stopped speaking. It has whispered through your instincts, echoed through your dreams, and sent shivers down your spine when something unseen was trying to get your attention. Even in your deepest moments of doubt, confusion, or forgetfulness, this part of you has been guiding you, not with logic or loud declarations, but with subtle pulses of knowing. This is your soul's voice, the quiet compass beneath the noise of the world, and it has been trying to lead you home. Most people think guidance must come from outside. They search for answers in books, in other people, in systems and beliefs, but the most profound truths have always lived within you. They rise not through effort, but through awareness. And often, they come in the form of things we've been conditioned to ignore: intuition, dreams, sudden feelings that make no sense, signs that repeat until we can't dismiss them. These aren't random. They're not wishful thinking. They are the sacred language of your soul, a language you once knew but have forgotten how to speak. Dreams are one of the clearest channels through which the soul communicates. In your waking life, your conscious mind is like a filter. It scans, judges, edits. But when you sleep, the walls fall away. Your soul can reach you without interference. Dreams bypass logic. They speak in symbols, archetypes, emotions. They show you what your surface mind can't see. Sometimes they are healing, sometimes prophetic, sometimes disorienting, but they are always meaningful. They reflect your inner landscape with unflinching clarity. That strange image you can't get out of your head, the recurring location, the familiar stranger, the moment that made you wake up in tears or awe, these are not just fragments of imagination. They are echoes from the deeper self. Your soul is trying to show you something you've forgotten or ignored, and when you begin to treat your dreams with reverence, they respond. The more you listen, the louder they become. The more you record, reflect, and honor them, the more your inner world begins to open. Symbols are the soul's alphabet. Unlike language, which is linear and limited, symbols speak in layers. A snake is not just a reptile, it's transformation, shedding, rebirth. Water is not just a liquid, it's emotion, unconscious depth, flow. Your soul sends you symbols constantly, in dreams, yes, but also in waking life. A bird that appears at a precise moment. A word that keeps showing up in books, conversations, songs. A repeated number, a strange coincidence, an intuitive nudge. These are not to be dismissed, they are part of the conversation. Synchronicity is the soul's way of confirming you're on the right path. When you're aligned, when you're open, present, tuned in, the world starts to reflect that inner harmony. You think of someone, and they call. You ask for a sign, and it shows up in the next sentence you hear. These are not flukes. They are evidence of a reality that is far more responsive, far more intelligent, than you've been led to believe. When you begin to trust these moments, they multiply. And eventually, life starts to feel less random, more poetic, like the unfolding of a sacred script. But to read that script, you have to relearn the language. The language of spirit is not loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It's subtle, intuitive, non-linear. It speaks through feeling, resonance, imagery, and timing. And if your mind is constantly busy, analyzing, doubting, rushing, you won't hear it. You'll miss it. That's why stillness matters. That's why silence is sacred. Not because there's something magical about sitting still, but because it creates the space for the soul's voice to rise above the noise. You were born fluent in this language. As a child, you felt things deeply. You sensed what wasn't being said. You trusted your feelings without justification. You knew when someone was lying. You knew when something was off. You believed in magic, because you were magic. But the world taught you to forget. It told you to be rational, to be logical, to trust only what could be proven. And so, you began to silence your inner voice. You began to mistrust the very compass that had never steered you wrong. But that voice didn't die. It waited. Through every wrong turn, every heartbreak, every moment of disconnection, it waited. And it's still waiting, patient, unchanging, ready to guide you the moment you turn inward and ask, what is true for me? Learning to hear it again doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require special training. It requires presence, willingness, curiosity. The first step is simple: pay attention. Not just with your eyes or ears, but with your whole being. Notice how your body reacts in different situations. Does something expand or contract? Notice the dreams that linger, the signs that repeat, the feelings that won't leave you alone. These are breadcrumbs, threads of light pulling you back to your center. Journaling helps. Meditation helps. Time in nature helps. But more than anything, it's the commitment to listen that opens the channel. Your soul doesn't care if you get it right. It cares that you're trying, that you're honoring the connection. And the more you trust it, the more it grows. What begins as a whisper becomes a conversation, then a friendship, then a knowing so deep, it doesn't need words at all. Eventually, you'll start to feel it in real time. You'll walk into a room and feel truth or deception instantly. You'll meet someone and know their energy before they speak. You'll feel nudges to take turns that make no sense, and later realize they saved you from something. You'll start living in harmony with an intelligence that sees what you can't. Because your soul isn't bound by time, it sees from a higher vantage point, and when you trust it, you begin to move with grace through a world that used to confuse you. This is not superstition, it's not escapism, it's remembrance. You are not just a mind with thoughts, you are a consciousness with wisdom that spans lifetimes. And the more you trust your inner knowing, the more you'll see how much of your suffering came from ignoring it. Your soul has been talking to you in dreams, symbols, feelings, and quiet moments for as long as you've been alive. It's not trying to control you, it's trying to reunite you with yourself. It's not a voice from above, it's the deepest part of you, the one who never left, never forgot, and always knew the way back home. Suffering has a strange way of opening doors that joy never could. When life unravels, when everything you've built begins to fall apart, it can feel like punishment. It can feel like you've been abandoned, betrayed, left alone to wander in a darkness so deep that even your own voice disappears. But what if those moments, the ones that break you open, are the exact conditions needed for something ancient within you to rise again? The soul doesn't speak the language of comfort. It speaks in symbols, in silence, in subtle shifts beneath the surface. And when crisis strikes, it doesn't mean you've strayed from your path. More often, it means you're finally ready to find it. Because when the structures of your life crumble, the relationships, the roles, the identities, what remains is not less of you, it's more. The more that was always hidden behind the noise. You've felt it, haven't you? That sudden clarity in the middle of chaos. That strange calm right after your world has collapsed. When the tears have dried and all you're left with is the raw, unfiltered presence of your own being. That's not just resilience, that's remembrance. That's the soul stepping forward when the ego finally quiets down. Crisis strips away illusion. It burns through what no longer serves. It exposes the parts of you built on fear, approval, or survival. And in that exposure, something real can emerge. Not because pain is noble, but because pain is honest. It shows you what you've clung to, what you've feared, and what you've forgotten. And beneath it all, it begins to whisper, not with answers, but with invitations. Invitations to go deeper, to question everything, to remember what truly matters. And then comes the silence. Silence is not emptiness. It is presence without pretense. It is the sacred space where your soul begins to speak again, now that everything else has been cleared out. But silence can be terrifying at first. Because in it, there are no distractions, no performances, no external validation. There is only you, the raw, unadorned, unfiltered you, and for many, that's where the fear lives. Not of silence, but of meeting themselves within it. But silence is where remembrance begins to take root. It's where the ancient memory buried deep within your being starts to stir. You start to feel things you haven't felt in years or ever. A longing for something you can't name, a sense of connection that doesn't make sense, a presence in the stillness that feels more real than anything else. These are the echoes of the soul breaking through the noise of identity. Stillness is not passivity, it is potency. It is where you reclaim your power from everything that has scattered your attention. It's where you begin to see clearly, not with the eyes of your mind, but with the eyes of your essence. In stillness, you're not trying to achieve or become. You're simply allowing what's already there to be revealed, and what's revealed is not a new self, but a deeper truth, the self that has always been, quietly waiting for your return. Breakdowns are not the end, they are the doorway into breakthrough, but they don't feel that way when you're in them. They feel like failure, loss, death, and in a way, they are. They are the death of who you thought you were, so that the truth of who you are can emerge. It's not clean, it's not easy, but it's sacred. There will be moments when you don't recognize yourself anymore, when the old goals no longer excite you, when the relationships around you begin to shift or fall away, when your passions change, your voice changes, your sense of reality changes. That's not dysfunction, that's transformation. That's your soul reorganizing your life around a deeper alignment. And while it may feel like losing everything, what you're actually losing is the illusion. To surrender doesn't mean to give up. It means to stop resisting what wants to unfold through you. It means to let go of the tight grip on your identity, on who you think you have to be, on what you thought your life was supposed to look like. It means allowing life to peel back the layers, trusting that what remains is not emptiness, but essence. Surrender is not weakness. It is the greatest strength. It is choosing trust over control, openness over certainty, being over doing. And it's in that surrender that the soul begins to take the lead. Not with fanfare, not with drama, but with quiet, grounded truth, with the kind of wisdom that doesn't need to prove itself, the kind that simply is. You may find yourself drawn to solitude more than ever before, not out of loneliness, but out of necessity, because in solitude, your inner world becomes more vivid. You begin to remember things you didn't know you knew. You begin to connect with energies and insights that had been drowned out by the volume of daily life. And you realize that solitude is not absence, it is presence amplified. It is where the soul becomes undeniable. The process of remembering through suffering, silence, and surrender is not linear, it's cyclical. You'll rise and fall 100 times, you'll forget and remember and forget again. But each time, you go deeper. Each time, something more authentic emerges. Each time, the layers thin and the truth becomes harder to ignore. You are not broken because you've suffered. You are not lost because you feel alone. You are on the edge of a sacred initiation, one that strips you bare not to wound you, but to reveal you. To bring you back into communion with the part of you that was never touched by pain, never changed by time, never lost at all. In that place, you begin to live differently. You no longer seek to escape the human experience, but to infuse it with presence. You no longer chase validation, because you've met the part of you that needs none. You walk with humility, not because you're small, but because you've touched something vast within yourself. And in that vastness, you begin to remember. You remember that crisis can be a calling, that silence can be a sanctuary, that surrender can be a return, and that the essence of who you are has always been waiting, just beyond the veil of what you thought you had to be. There are things about you that can't be explained by this life alone, the irrational fears that rise from nowhere, the gifts that come without training, the strange pull towards certain places, people, or eras. You feel these things not with your mind, but with your entire being, as if some part of you remembers something your conscious self has never lived. And that's because it has. What you call this life is only the latest chapter in a much longer story, a story your soul has been writing across centuries, across continents, across stars. You've been here before, not in this body, not with this name, but with this essence, the same light wearing different clothes. Reincarnation isn't just a belief, it's a memory. It's a knowing that rises in the quiet moments when you feel older than your years. When something inside you says, "I've done this before," the soul does not live once and vanish. It journeys. It returns. Not out of punishment, but out of purpose. Each lifetime is a lesson, a refinement, a continuation. You're not starting over, you're picking up where you left off. And the challenges you face today often carry the fingerprints of choices made long ago. Your soul isn't linear. It doesn't count time the way your mind does. To the soul, all lifetimes are happening simultaneously in the field of the eternal now. But within the human experience, those lifetimes unfold like pages in a book, each chapter building on the one before. And like any good story, certain themes repeat. Not because you're stuck, but because you're being offered a chance to master something you once struggled to learn. That fear you've carried since childhood, the one that makes no sense but never leaves, it may not be from this life. It may be a residue, an echo from a past experience that left a mark on your energetic body. The moment your current life touches something similar, that fear is reactivated, not to punish you, but to give you another chance to heal it, to choose differently, to respond with the wisdom you've gained. Likewise, your talents are not random. They are the continuation of gifts cultivated over lifetimes. The writer who's never studied, but feels compelled to write. The healer who instinctively knows how to soothe. The artist who sees visions before the brush touches the canvas. These are not accidents. They are soul memories reawakening. Your genius didn't begin here. It is ancient, and when you honor it, it grows. Your relationships, too, carry the scent of other lifetimes. The instant connection with a stranger, the love that feels eternal, the conflict that flares without warning. These are signs that your souls have danced before, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in pain, but always with purpose. These bonds are not new. They are threads woven through multiple incarnations, bringing you back together to complete what was left undone, to deepen what was once shallow, or to finally release what's been binding you for centuries. When you start to look at life through this lens, things that once seemed cruel begin to make sense. The heartbreak wasn't random. It was the breaking of a karmic cycle. The illness wasn't just physical, it was a soul initiation. The losses weren't failures, they were sacred completions. Everything begins to feel intentional, not controlled, not predetermined, but rich with meaning. Every moment becomes a classroom, every person a mirror, every wound a doorway. The soul's memory is long, and though most of it is hidden from your conscious awareness, it leaks through in dreams, in emotions, in the stories you tell yourself without knowing why. A smell can trigger it. A song, a landscape. You walk into a place you've never been and feel like you're home. You read about a culture you've never studied and feel an ache of longing. These are soul echoes. Remnants of lives lived in different skins, under different skies. But why don't you remember more clearly? Because this life is where your focus needs to be. You came here to experience something specific, and too much memory would distract you. But as you awaken, as you grow in consciousness, glimpses begin to return, not in full detail, but in feeling, and those feelings can guide you. They show you where to heal, where to serve, where to step into your fullest self. You don't need to chase past life information obsessively. You only need to notice what keeps repeating, what triggers you, what draws you. The patterns of your life are the fingerprints of your soul. Pay attention to what keeps showing up, not just in your behavior, but in your lineage, your desires, your dreams. They are clues that point to deeper stories still unfolding. And know this, you are not bound by your past. You are shaped by it, but not imprisoned by it. Karma is not a sentence, it's a curriculum. You're not being punished for what you did. You're being offered opportunities to choose love where you once chose fear, to forgive where you once held on, to expand where you once contracted. And the moment you do, the moment you bring awareness to the pattern and act from your higher self, the cycle breaks. You're not here to repeat, you're here to evolve. Some of the things you've faced in this life are echoes of other lives you didn't finish. That's why they feel so intense, so familiar. And when you face them now with clarity, compassion, and courage, you're not just healing this lifetime, you're healing the ones that came before. You've been a seeker before. You've been a healer, a warrior, a mystic, a student. You've lived in temples and in battlefields. You've loved and lost and loved again, and now, you've returned. Not to escape the past, but to redeem it, to carry forward the best of what you've been, and finally release the rest. Your soul is not young, it is ancient and wise. And when you begin to honor the long journey it has taken to become who you are today, something shifts. You stop judging yourself so harshly. You stop rushing. You start to see yourself as a traveler, not lost, but learning. Not broken, but brave. And every step you take, every truth you uncover, every time you listen to the whispers of your soul, you come closer to remembering. You didn't begin here, and you won't end here. This life is a chapter, a meaningful, sacred chapter, and when you live it fully, with presence and purpose, you do more than grow, you awaken. And through that awakening, the ancient story of your soul begins to sing once again. There is a field that exists beyond time, beyond form, beyond the limits of what the human eye can perceive. It cannot be touched or measured in the conventional sense, but it surrounds you, moves through you, and holds within it the record of everything your soul has ever experienced, every thought you've ever had, every word you've spoken, every choice you've made, not just in this lifetime, but across countless others. This is the Akashic field, the soul's cosmic blueprint, and whether you realize it or not, you are connected to it right now. You don't need to be a mystic to access it. You don't need sacred texts, holy rituals, or ancient languages. The Akashic field is not something external you travel to. It's a layer of reality that your consciousness is already woven into. It's a vibrational archive of your soul's journey. And the more aligned you become with your essence, the more clearly you begin to perceive it. Imagine a vast, intelligent matrix of light that records the energetic imprint of everything that happens in the universe, not in judgment, not as surveillance, but as a mirror of truth. Every intention, every experience, every nuance of your evolution is stored there, not to trap you in karma, but to guide you back to wholeness. The Akashic field is not a static book on a shelf. It is alive, fluid, reflective. It responds to the frequency you carry in each moment. You've already touched it, probably without realizing. That moment of sudden insight that seemed to come out of nowhere. The powerful sense of déjà vu when you meet someone for the first time. The recurring dream that carries a truth deeper than words. These are echoes from the field, surfacing when you are vibrationally attuned to receive them. It's not about trying harder. It's about becoming still enough, open enough, present enough, to feel what has always been there. Your soul was encoded with a unique pattern the moment it emerged from Source. That pattern is not random, it's sacred. It contains the essence of your purpose, your lessons, your gifts, and your contracts. It's why you feel drawn to certain paths, why some people feel instantly familiar, why some challenges repeat until they're integrated. The Akashic field doesn't just store the past, it illuminates the potentials of the future, based on the vibration you hold in the present. And this is where the power lies, because when you begin to live from the record within you, rather than trying to constantly seek truth outside of yourself, your life begins to change in subtle but profound ways. You stop feeling like you're guessing your way through existence. You start to feel guided. Not by an external force, but by an inner resonance that is unmistakable. You begin to recognize the difference between a path that's aligned with your soul's blueprint and one that's simply a distraction dressed as opportunity. Accessing this wisdom is not about escaping the human experience, it's about infusing it with remembrance. It's about listening for the vibration beneath your decisions. About noticing which actions expand your energy and which ones contract it. Your soul speaks through resonance. The Akashic field responds through frequency. When you begin to align with your truest self, the field opens, not because it was closed, but because you were. Stillness becomes the gateway, presence becomes the language, and intention becomes the key. You might wonder, if the field contains every experience my soul has ever had, does that mean my path is already determined? The answer is no. The Akashic field does not dictate your fate. It reflects your choices. It holds the full spectrum of your potential, the patterns that have shaped you, and the paths that are possible based on where you are now. It shows you what you're resonant with, but it never forces you. It offers truth, but never control. And when you engage with it consciously, something beautiful begins to happen. You start to heal not just the surface symptoms of your life, but the deeper distortions carried across lifetimes. You begin to release old contracts that no longer serve your growth. You reclaim fragmented parts of yourself that have been stuck in loops of guilt, shame, or fear. The field doesn't just show you what was, it helps you remember who you've always been beneath what happened. This remembrance isn't abstract. It's deeply practical. When you live from your soul's blueprint, decisions become clearer, relationships become more honest. Your work, your time, your presence begin to reflect your truth. You become less reactive, more intentional, less bound by old wounds, more guided by inner knowing. You stop being a victim of life and start becoming a conscious co-creator within it. The Akashic field also teaches humility, because when you realize that every soul carries its own sacred record, judgment begins to fall away. You stop seeing others as random characters in your story and begin to recognize them as fellow travelers, each walking a path shaped by ancient currents of choice and consequence. You start to see beyond behavior into the blueprint behind it, and from that seeing, compassion grows. You are not disconnected, you are not adrift, you are held within a web of intelligence so vast, so loving, so intricately tuned to your growth, that nothing is wasted, not your joy, not your heartbreak, not even your mistakes. Everything is recorded, not to trap you, but to teach you, to reflect you back to yourself. To show you, again and again, that who you are is not the story you've lived, but the essence you've carried through it. And the more you listen, the more the Akashic field begins to reveal itself in your daily life. Not as thunderbolts of prophecy, but as quiet knowings, as a feeling of being in the right place at the right time, as the gentle nudge that says yes when your mind says no, as the peace that floods your body when you make a choice your soul has waited lifetimes for. You were never meant to walk blindly, you were meant to walk in remembrance. The field is always with you, it is not above you, it is in you. Every time you breathe with intention, every time you speak with integrity, every time you pause to feel instead of react, you are living from the record. You are moving in harmony with the pattern your soul chose long before this life began. And in doing so, you become a living transmission, a walking reminder to others that they too have a blueprint, that they too are held in a field of light that remembers everything their mind has forgotten. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be present, because in your presence, the Akashic field becomes active, alive, and through you, remembrance becomes real. There comes a moment when something stirs inside you, quietly at first, like a whisper just beneath the surface of your life. You can't explain it logically. It's not based on anything you read or heard. It's simply there, a sense that you've been here before, that the world is somehow familiar in ways you've never been taught. You begin to see things differently, people, places, even yourself. And though nothing on the outside seems to have changed, everything on the inside begins to shift. This is how remembering starts, not with a thunderclap, but with a quiet knowing that refuses to leave. You might be walking down a street you've never been to before and feel it hit you like a wave, a sudden rush of familiarity so deep it makes your heart ache. Or maybe you meet someone, and the connection is instant, intense, inexplicable, like you've known them forever. You can't trace it to a memory, but your soul reacts as if it's reuniting with something lost. These moments are not coincidences, they are signs that your soul is waking up. Déjà vu isn't just a glitch in the mind, it's a fragment of memory bleeding through the veil. It's your soul nudging you, saying, "We've walked this path before." It may not be the exact road, but the energy, the lesson, the vibration, it's familiar. These glimpses are pieces of the puzzle returning, not to confuse you, but to remind you that there's more to who you are than what you've been told. Then there are the spontaneous knowings, moments where you simply know something without any logical reason. You don't know how you just do. You feel it in your bones, in your gut, in your chest. Truth resonates. It lands with a weight that's gentle but immovable. These knowings often contradict what you've been taught. They're inconvenient, sometimes even uncomfortable, because they don't come from the mind, they come from the soul. And the soul doesn't care about what's popular. It cares about what's real. Emotional reactions with no clear origin are another sign. You might hear a song, see an image, visit a location, and suddenly feel overwhelmed with tears, joy, or longing. Not because of what's in front of you, but because of what it touches inside you. These are memory imprints from other lifetimes or from forgotten parts of yourself. They live in your energy body, waiting to be reawakened. The emotion is not irrational, it's ancient, and when it rises, it's a call to pay attention. As you begin to remember, you'll also feel an increasing discomfort with anything that's false. The lies you've told yourself, the roles you've played, the masks you've worn, they begin to feel heavier, harder to carry. The life you built out of survival starts to suffocate the soul that's trying to emerge. And that friction creates a kind of inner pressure. You may feel restless, dissatisfied, even depressed, but this is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of awakening. The discomfort isn't punishment, it's initiation. You'll start to crave authenticity like never before. Superficial conversations no longer satisfy. Material pursuits lose their flavor. You want something real. Something that nourishes your spirit, not just your ego. This longing is sacred. It's the soul saying, "I'm ready to come forward now." You may begin shedding old relationships, careers, belief systems. Not because you're ungrateful, but because they no longer fit the version of you that's being born. You might also notice time behaving differently. Hours disappear, moments stretch. You find yourself in flow states more often, guided by something you can't quite name. Synchronicities increase. The right people, books, messages start arriving at the perfect moment. This is not chance. This is the universe aligning with your internal shift. The more you remember who you are, the more the outer world begins to reflect that truth. One of the clearest signs you're starting to remember is the emergence of purpose. It may not come as a fully formed plan, but it begins as a sense of direction, a pull towards something meaningful, a desire to serve, to create, to heal, to express. You no longer want to live on autopilot. You want to participate consciously in the unfolding of your life. And even if the path is unclear, you feel a deep commitment to walk it anyway. You'll also find that you can't betray yourself as easily. Where you once said yes to keep the peace, now you pause. Where you once stayed silent, now you speak. Not because you're trying to be bold, but because it's unbearable not to be. The soul cannot unknow itself once it begins to awaken, and it demands integrity, alignment, truth. This may disrupt your external world, but it brings peace to your inner one. Another sign is a sense of sacredness returning to ordinary life. You begin to see the divine in everything, the way sunlight moves across a room, the sound of laughter, the way your breath rises and falls. Life becomes less about chasing and more about presence. You stop needing things to be extraordinary and start seeing the extraordinary in everything. Gratitude becomes natural, not forced, or returns. And with it, a sense of homecoming. You may also begin to remember fragments of past lives, through dreams, visions, or feelings. You might be drawn to certain cultures, eras, or spiritual paths with no rational explanation. These aren't obsessions, they're echoes, parts of your soul's journey resurfacing because they hold keys to your current evolution. You don't need to retrieve every detail. You only need to follow the resonance. The soul reveals what you're ready to remember. Ultimately, the most powerful sign that you're starting to remember is a growing sense of wholeness. You begin to feel less fragmented, less lost. You stop needing to prove yourself, because you start to feel yourself. Not the self the world gave you, but the one you've always been beneath the noise. And that self is not afraid. It's not in a rush. It doesn't chase worthiness, it is worthiness. You don't become someone new when you remember. You become who you are always meant to be. Not a version of yourself shaped by fear, comparison, or survival, but the version shaped by truth, by love, by soul. The one who walks through the world with open eyes and an open heart. The one who remembers the light, even when surrounded by shadow. This remembering is not a destination, it's a process, a spiral, a return, and each step brings you closer to the truth that's never been lost, only buried. You are not awakening to something outside of you. You are awakening to you. And in that remembering, you reclaim everything that ever mattered. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when something begins to stir deep within, a feeling you can't quite name, a longing that refuses to be silenced. It doesn't arise from the mind. It doesn't come from desire or ambition. It emerges from the ancient part of you that never forgot why you came here in the first place. This is the beginning of awakening, the slow, sometimes disorienting, but ultimately sacred return to divine will. And whether you've realized it yet or not, this moment is not accidental. You are remembering not just who you are, but why you are. For so long, it's easy to move through life in a kind of spiritual sleep. You follow the rules. You chase the things you're told matter. You try to become what the world praises, often burying the quieter truths that live within you. The soul becomes background noise, something you may feel during brief moments of stillness or struggle, but not something you let lead. And so you live half awake, trying to fill the space where purpose once lived, with achievement, approval, or distraction, but none of it satisfies. Not because you're failing, but because your soul is refusing to settle. The more you awaken, the less you can pretend. The less you can tolerate a life that doesn't reflect who you truly are. The less you can ignore the pull towards something deeper, something real. This is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough, the cracking of the shell the ego built around you to keep you safe, and what it reveals is not weakness, but truth, the truth that you came here for a reason. Not to survive, not to perform, but to serve. Not in the way the world defines service, but in the way only your soul can. You are not here by chance. The timing, the body, the family, the environment you were born into, none of it is random. Your soul chose this life for a purpose that is larger than any single moment. And that purpose is not something you find outside of yourself. It's something you remember from within. You carry a unique frequency, a vibration that only you can express. And when you begin to align with it, you stop living from effort and start living from resonance. This is what it means to align with divine will, not to give up your freedom, but to remember that your deepest desires, the ones that persist even when everything else falls away, were placed in you by something greater. Divine will doesn't override you, it includes you. It works through your heart, your gifts, your truth. It wants to create with you, not against you. And when you surrender to that deeper guidance, your life becomes a dance instead of a struggle. To co-create with Source is not about becoming holy or perfect, it's about becoming honest. Honest about who you are, about what matters, about what you're here to bring. It's about stripping away the expectations and lies you've inherited, and letting the real you, the soul you, lead the way. That might mean walking away from what no longer fits. It might mean stepping into the unknown. But it also means stepping into your power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that radiates. You don't need a title to live your purpose. You don't need a platform, a certificate, or a sign from the sky. You only need to listen, to feel what's asking to move through you, and to say yes to it. even when it scares you, even when it doesn't make sense to others. Because when you say yes to your soul, you say yes to the will that created you. You stop trying to force outcomes and start allowing miracles. You begin to notice synchronicities, signs that the universe is responding to your vibration. You begin to feel supported in ways that defy logic. You meet people who speak the language your soul remembers. Opportunities align, doors open, not because you're lucky, but because you're in flow. Divine will is not a path you force your way into, it's a current you learn to ride. And the more you trust it, the more alive you become. Living in alignment doesn't mean you won't face challenges, but those challenges take on a new meaning. They become initiations, not punishments. They reveal the next layer of truth. They carve space for more of your soul to emerge. You begin to see that everything, even the pain, even the detours, was part of your training, preparing you to carry more light, preparing you to become a bridge between realms. Because that's what you are, a bridge, between heaven and earth, between the unseen and the visible, between spirit and form. Your presence, when aligned, becomes a doorway for others to remember too. You don't have to preach or persuade, you simply be. And in your being, you emit a frequency that calls others back to themselves. This is sacred work, quiet work, world-changing work, and it begins not with a dramatic transformation, but with a choice, to stop pretending, to stop postponing, to stop living as though your life doesn't matter, because it does. Your existence is a thread in a much larger tapestry. And when you step into your place with authenticity, the entire pattern becomes more beautiful. There is no formula for this, no map. The soul doesn't follow blueprints, it follows truth. You may be called to art, or healing, or parenting, or teaching, or simply living with so much integrity that others remember who they are in your presence. Purpose is not always loud, but it is always clear. It resonates in the bones, and once you feel it, there's no going back. You came here to remember, to awaken, to realign, not just for yourself, but for the collective, because every soul that steps into divine will becomes a beacon, a reminder, a ripple. You don't need to fix the world. You only need to become the most true version of yourself. That alone is more powerful than you know. So if you're feeling the pull, that inner nudge, that quiet ache, know that it's not your imagination, it's your invitation to live the life your soul designed. To co-create with the force that made you, to become the bridge you were always meant to be, not someday, but now. Because why you came here matters, more than you've ever been told. At some point, all the searching leads back to silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the deep, sacred stillness that lives within you, the space that has always been waiting, untouched by time, immune to illusion. You begin to realize that every journey you've ever taken, every lifetime, every heartbreak, every question was guiding you back to this point, back to yourself, back to the light that has never left you. And in that moment, you understand something so simple, so profound, that it brings you to your knees. You were never lost, you only forgot. The arc of your soul's journey is not a straight line, it is a spiral, from light to form, to forgetfulness, to awakening, and finally, to remembrance. You began in unity, descended into duality, wandered through shadows, and now, you rise again. Not to become something new, but to become what you already are, light embodied, spirit remembered, truth lived. The return to light is not about escaping the world. It's about bringing your light into the world. This path of return is not instant. It unfolds through lifetimes, through layers, through countless initiations. Each experience, no matter how painful or beautiful, is part of the great remembering. The soul learns not just through revelation, but through contrast, through the long, slow burning away of what is false. And as each illusion falls, what's left is you, the real you. The you that existed before name, before fear, before form. You were never meant to stay asleep. The amnesia was temporary, necessary perhaps, for the lessons to take root. But your destiny was always remembrance. To remember that you are not a body with a soul, you are a soul having a human experience. You are not the roles you play, the wounds you carry, or the stories you've believed. You are the awareness behind it all, the observer, the witness, the eternal presence. And as you remember, your life changes. Not because everything becomes easy, but because everything becomes clear. You stop fighting yourself. You stop chasing what was never meant for you. You begin to live in alignment with your essence, not your ego. And in that alignment, there is peace. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of truth. A knowing that no matter what happens, you are exactly where you are meant to be. Reclaiming your divine identity is not about ego. It's not about claiming superiority or spiritual status. It's about humility, about recognizing the sacred spark in everyone. Because when you remember your own light, you begin to see it in others. The person you once judged becomes a mirror. The one you feared becomes a teacher. The one you loved becomes a reflection of your own heart. And you realize that the separation was never real, only perceived. This is when something beautiful happens. You stop trying to change others, and you start embodying the truth, not through preaching, but through presence, through being. Your life becomes a living transmission. People around you start to shift, not because of what you say, but because of who you are. Your peace becomes contagious. Your joy becomes permission. Your authenticity becomes a lighthouse. Helping others awaken doesn't require a platform. It doesn't require followers or fame. It requires presence, integrity, love. It requires you to walk your path with open eyes and an open heart, knowing that every step you take toward the light clears the way for someone else. You become a bridge between spirit and matter, between old and new, between who you were and who you are becoming. And still, the journey continues. Because awakening is not a final destination, it's a deepening, an unfolding. With each new layer of remembrance, more light floods in. You begin to see the divine choreography of your life. How every wound was an opening. How every delay was protection. How every loss was preparing you for what is eternal. You start to trust life. Not because it's predictable, but because it's intelligent. Because you can feel the deeper order beneath the chaos. The world around you may not understand. That's okay. Awakening is often lonely, especially at first. But it is not isolation, it is consecration. You are being prepared to carry a frequency that the world desperately needs. A vibration of remembrance in a time of mass forgetting. A song of truth in a world of noise. And this truth is simple. You are light, you always were. Before the trauma, before the confusion, before the fall, you were whole. And you still are. The forgetting didn't change your essence, it only obscured it. And now, as you remember, you reclaim your place in the tapestry of creation. Not as someone separate or small, but as a vital thread in the cosmic weave. You are the light you've been searching for. Not the light in another, not the light in some far-off heaven, your light. The one that shines when you stop trying to be what you're not. The one that rises when you choose truth over fear, presence over performance, love over illusion. This is the light that heals, that transforms, that guides others home. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be willing to see, willing to remember, willing to let go of the stories that dim your glow. Because beneath every doubt, every fear, every layer of forgetting, you are radiant, timeless, whole. And now, it's time to live, as if that's true, because it is.